So nice to see everybody. It's a pleasure. I really enjoy doing this. It's kind of low key for me. It gives me a chance to try stuff and work out some content that I like, to teach. And so today we're going to really start with data formats. This is pretty basic stuff, maybe for some of you. Maybe you work with this already. If you work with JSON or YAML or XML, this is real basic stuff. But again, I've mentioned in my email, I'm assuming no prior knowledge in any of this. And I also realize a lot of the books just kind of glaze over on this. They say, yeah, you need to know this is how it works, and we'll move on. But I think it's important to, first of all, understand the different ones. And I'm always really good in any data format I'm working with at that time, because I have to remind myself the structure of it and the rules and all this. And then I forget the other ones. And then the other ones are completely foreign to me until I get into that. So I'll know JSON when I'm working on it, but forget XML and YAML. Then I'll be doing something with YAML, and it's like I've forgotten JSON. So that's just how it is with me. But one of the cool things, we have some very useful tools that I'll be going over here in a moment that allow you to make sure that you can convert between the different ones very easily and validate that the data structure is okay and all that. So let's actually get into this here. By the way, here on Canvas, you can see here's the PowerPoint that we're going to be using. I have some useful links. I'll be bringing those up. And then here are the files I'm going to be using tonight. So JSON, YAML, and XML. And basically, it's the same data, just in 3 different formats. Okay. All right, so let me get started here, at least with this part of it. So data formats. Okay, so again, I always suggest these are still 2 of the best books I've seen out there. Waiting for a new one from Jeff Doyle, but this is probably 2 of the best books I've seen out there. Okay, data formats. Basically, all it is taking data, information, that the data that you're collecting on something. Maybe you're, collecting, you have a list of people, and how are you going to structure it? How is it going to be organized? What are the rules? So this is very common. We do this with programming languages. If you've done any coding, that there's rules and syntax. Well, with the data structure, there's rules and syntax as well. Okay, there's certain syntax. Some use brackets, some don't. Some care about white space, indentation, some don't. Some use quotes and commas, some don't. It just depends. Okay. The object, so the object we're talking about, which can be the whole thing of data, that the file of data, let's call it, that we're talking about, could be an object, but some, like JSON, can have objects within an object. We'll talk about those. It's just, again, how do we want to organize the data? And there can be characters and strings, lists, arrays, and they all call them slightly different things. What might be an array in one data format might just be a simple list in another. So even what they call these things vary. But one thing what we use these data formats for is a lot of it has all to do with key value pairs. Okay, we're going to see some examples of this, not in the networking context tonight. We will later, but we'll get to that. Tonight, we're just going to kind of keep it really simple and look at how to examine key value pairs in these different formats. But a key is just identifies a type of data, like first name or last name or age. And then the value is the value assigned to that. Rick, first name, last name, Graziani, age, 29, in some number base that I won't go in, probably not base 10, I'll tell you that. Okay, so who uses this in networking? So why are we even learning this? So in NetConf, which we have, I'm going to At some point, I'm going to show you, actually after the break, show you a little example of net. So kind of where we're headed, by the way, after, next week I'm going to talk about, or 2 weeks, APIs. And then when we come back, I'm going to give you a quick demo of netconf, restconf, Ansible, and then we're going to dive deep into these. But netconf uses XML, okay? Restconf supports both JSON and XML. And Ansible has a playbook file, which you don't know about any of these things, by the way, that's fine. Yaml, but also has an inventory file that can be optionally done in YAML or JSON. So nobody agrees on what is the best. There's kind of certain things like YAML is kind of a little more easy to read. JSON, as we're going to get into first, and probably spend the most time on, because once you understand JSON, the others are really easy. But JSON has a very interesting relationship with Python, very similar to Python, Python data structure. Okay, so let's get into JSON. Okay, JSON is a human readable data format. They all are meant to be human readable, okay, for storing and transferring data, okay? Frequently used by databases and APIs, but they don't have to, it doesn't have to be JSON. And they're all readable by humans and machines. So over here on the left, I have some partial output from a show interface gigabit try zero command on a router. And it's quite lengthy, actually. And the format of this is it's just written text. It's just strings of text written by whoever programmed this, decided this is how the format of how the output's going to be. And you actually have to search for things. It's written like internet address is, the line protocol is up, connected. But trying to find the data and even writing a program that to parse this, to pull out what you want, this might be only particular, well, it is particular to this vendor, Cisco. And if the vendor changes the output at all, your coding it's how you parse it to find the IP address, let's say, would be, you got to change your code to find the IP address. This is showing JSON. So JSON is all about key value pairs. Okay, so we'll be taking a look at this, but we have a key and a value. So gigabit Ethernet, and actually the value is all of this, but the name is quad 0. IP actually is all of this, but here we go, address, mask. Okay. I'm going to look at this more in a moment. But JSON is very popular, used by web services and APIs like Google Maps uses JSON. Next week, we're going to do, 2 weeks, we're going to do APIs. We're going to actually use MapQuest instead of Google Maps, because Google Maps requires, although they're both free to use, Google Maps requires you to use a credit card now, even when it's free. But anyway, this is much easier to parse. And we'll be seeing this next week, all the information, but key value pairs, formatted address, and here's the San Jose, California, USA, location, latitude this, longitude this. So we'll see that with the API next week. Okay, International Space Station. Here's a very simple one, and I've got that right here, International Space Station. But I've also got it right here. So here's the International Space Station. And I can actually go right here and click on this. And basically what this is an API that's going to return some information in the JSON format. Okay. What this API does is, as it says here, it returns the current latitude and longitude of the space station with a Unix timestamp for the time the location was valid. This API takes no input. Basically, all we have to do is click on it. So let's do that. And here's the latitude and longitude. The latitude and longitude, latitude, longitude, There's the Unix timestamp. It was success, but it's as you'll see in a moment, these are just key value pairs. The key, timestamp, value, here it is in Unix timestamp. Then we have a key called ISS position, but it's made up of two key value pairs. It's actually, this is called an object. Latitude, this, longitude, this. Message, that's the key. The value is this call was successful. This API call was successful. Okay. I'm going to close this. All right. 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. I had the heater on. It was getting a little warm in here. All right. So that's the International Space Station. And it happens to return the data in JSON. Now you can write a program to do whatever you want with that data. And we'll see that next week with an API. So I'm assuming no prior knowledge. So don't worry about it if you're new to this. Okay. This web link includes a link for, okay, so I showed you that already. All right. And by the way, so notice that when I showed it, it showed it, I should have, where's my, let me do this again. By the way, if you click on links in Canvas, you will see this. What you got to do is click right here, right? You got to click on the link here, and then it will open it up. What I wanted to show you here is when I clicked on this, notice it showed it to me in a nice, easy to read format. Okay. That may not be the case on your browser. Okay. And let me explain why here. Okay. You may see it in this format here. JSON, for the white spaces and indentation doesn't matter. But the reason why it shows it to me in that really nice format using Chrome is I have this extension in my Chrome browser called Json View. All you need to do is Google Json View extension, and then takes you there, and just a single button extends it, adds it to your browser. You have that extension. And so anytime you look at JSON data, it comes up in a nice, easy to view format. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this too much. I just want to mention that if you're familiar with Python, it's going to look very familiar to JSON. JSON uses something called a dictionary. We'll talk, I'm going to do a little talk on Python. Maybe I'll do it separately for those people that are kind of new to Python. But we don't need to worry about that right now. But you can see these are just key value pairs, and they look very similar. Just happens to be a list of Major League Baseball teams, the city, and the name of the team. And JSON and Python looks very similar. So that's why it's very common for people to use JSON because especially when writing Python code. Okay, JSON. Well, here's some rules. What? Those are a lot of rules, right? Well, let's go over some of these rules. Okay, so here I have some JSON, a JSON file called evans.json. Okay, so this is known as a JSON object. It happens to be somebody's name, Florida Evans, from an old TV show called Good Times. And it gives her name, age, children, and the address where she lived. Okay, this is an object. So an object, JSON object, starts with these enclosed braces. You have an opening brace and an ending brace. So I should probably have done these in different colors, but this is the braces for the entire object. Just thinking about the whole group of data that you're working with. Okay. So braces hold objects. So this is the main JSON object. But as you can see here, we have another object here. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly. But this is a separate object. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Data is written in key value pairs. So I have the key in blue, and the value in orange. Okay. And as you can see that the keys must be written in double quotations. Okay, that's just a JSON rule. Okay, double quotations for the key. Okay, the values can be of any type. So here I have, this is a string of text. Okay, double quotes. Here I have an integer, a number, so no quotes, 35. Okay. Here I have a series of names, JJ, Thelma, Michael. Well, look at this. This is actually this is actually an array or a list. I'll talk more about that in a moment. The keys and values are separated by a colon. And here's key. Shouldn't use that term. Here's an important item. Well, no, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Multiple, this is important, but notice that we separate multiple key value strings with a comma. So comma, and then a new key value, comma. These values in here, I'll talk about that in a moment, comma, but here's a key, children, and the value is all of this. So we have a comma. Okay. Address, this is another key. The whole value is in these braces here. But within this is an object. I'll talk more about this in a moment. This is an object within an object. So we want to have a list of key value pairs within this list of key value pairs, like address. We have street, city, state, and zip. These are all different key value pairs separated by a comma. Now, the one thing to note is that commas are only used to separate key value pairs. The last key value pair does not have a comma. So notice we do not have a comma here at the end here within these braces. Notice we don't have a comma here after 10707. Okay. And the other thing is white space is not significant, meaning this indentation makes no difference to JSON. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about how this data is organized. Okay. This here is a JSON array. Okay. So this is where if we want a key to have multiple values, we can list the values. Okay, it's just an ordered list of values. Okay, JJ, Thelma, Michael. And they can be of different data types. These just happen to be all strings, so they have quotes. But the array really doesn't matter. But it can hold different data types. Okay. Let's see, the key followed by a colon, a list of values. Okay, so here's the key, children, colon, and the list of values. Okay, I mentioned it could be multiple data types. This happens to be all strings. Okay, each value in the array is separated by a comma. Okay. So this is just a simple array of values. Okay. Now, let's see here. I think I've got, yeah, I'm going to come back to this here in a moment. I'm going to come back to all of this. But I want to show you is that we have an easy way to help us format all of this stuff. So what I am using here is something called Visual Studio Code. And because I named this file .json, it says, okay, I'm going to help you out, Rick. I know this is JSON, so I'm going to color code things for you. If I called this dot something else, it could be a JSON file, but it's not going to color code it for me. Also, it kind of helps me out here, because if I make a mistake, let's say I forgot the comma here. Notice this red line here. It's telling me something's amiss. Kind of like when you're using Word or something. It says you may want to look at that. Okay, because I need a comma there. Okay. So So this is where things like Visual Studio Code really help. And again, this is a free download, and you can find that download right here, or just Google Visual Studio Code. Okay. So this is, by the way, is known as an IDE, Visual Studio Code, Integrated Development Environment. Not only does it help you with your data, but as we'll see next week, it helps us formatting Python or any program I'm running. I can actually run my Python code from this environment. And we're going to do that in, I keep on saying next week, in 2 weeks when we talk about APIs. And again, the file extension matters, okay? Because that's going to help Visual Studio Code help you and kind of color coding things and letting you know where you're making mistakes in that. And again, white space is not significant, okay? So here's that same JSON data, which is totally valid, okay? But what if, I don't like it like that. What if I want to make it look pretty? Okay, I can use something called, there's several out there, okay? I use one called Code Beautify, okay? And so I can take this code, I think I've got a separate, by the way, here's Visual Studio Code to download it very easily. Here's Code Beautify, and it does all kinds of things for you, okay? Here's some of the most popular functionality, but here's other things. And I can actually just type in like Json Beautifier. Oh, okay, great. It's going to help me beautify my code. And it'll take me someplace, and let me kind of get rid of that. Here's actually that same code I was working with. It always remembers what I was working with last. But here's that JSON code, but that's not as easy to read as rich PowerPoint, was it? So all I need to do is click right here where it says Beautify. And there we go. Look at that. Okay. And I could even copy and paste this into my program or whatever, or into I can copy and paste it here. Now notice this is Visual Studio Code, but it doesn't look, where'd all the color go? Okay, that's because I have to name it. Give it a name that it means something. Okay, I don't test.json. Watch when I give it .json as the extension. Voila. Okay, all right, let me close that. All right. So here I'm just showing again the PowerPoint, what I just showed you, Beautify. Okay, there's also JSON validators out there. And by the way, Code Beautify also has a validator. But I just want to show you one that's a little different. So let me actually take some JSON code here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing. Can you have a space in a key name? Yes. So for JSON, you can have, a space in the name of the key. No. Well, can you have a space? Yeah, you can have a space in the name of the key. That's usually not common though, because, and there's reasons for that. It's usually because if you're getting that information to and from like a Python, it converts it to a Python dictionary, doesn't like spaces. So yeah, good question. But we usually don't use spaces in names, in keys. Okay, let me bring up my YAML here again. My Visual Studio Code. And what if I made a mistake here? Okay, let's say I put a comma here. Now you can see it has a little red thing here. Okay, but maybe I'm using something else and it didn't tell me. What if I want to validate this? I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to my Json Validator. I'm going to paste it in and I'm going to click here, validate. And it tells me, hey, something's wrong. What's it telling me that's wrong? It's telling me down here, it says expecting a string got, so it's expecting a string and it got a comma. It says, why do you have a comma? Well, I thought we put commas after every key value pair. No, we only put commas between key value pairs. There's no key value pair after this. This is the last one. So I'm going to hit enter here. Show you this. I'm going to hit enter, get rid of that. Whoops. Validate. And now it says valid JSON. So there's a lot of tools out there just to help us, okay, which is really nice. All right, so this was my kind of my simple one. All right, let's talk a little bit. Let's take a look at another one. I'm going to actually for children. So notice what I did here. Oops. For Florida's children, she had just put the names. But what if we structured our data that we actually want more than their names? We want their name. We want to know their names. And we don't even, how do I even know this is their names? I'm just assuming this is their names. Okay. But obviously it is. But let's say I want their name and their age. So what we can do is take children, which is a key. Okay. And so, and actually make it an array, a list. So an array is a list. Okay, JSON and Python, one calls it an array, the other one calls it a list. We want to just have a list or an array of values. So the array, and by the way, you don't have to memorize this, but let's take a look. Whenever I want to do an array in JSON, we use these square brackets. That means I'm going to have multiple things. Okay, just like I did here, I had multiple things. But the difference between here and here is this is a simple list. This is a simple, just values for children. 3 different values for children consists of 3 values. But this list here actually consists of 3 objects. Each object is its own grouping of key value pairs. So notice these are the same. First name, age, first name, age, first name, age. There are 3 pairs of the same key value pairs. And we have the key, first name, and the value, age, and the value. Okay, so this is known as a nested array of objects, of key value pairs. The object, here we have an object inside of an object. We have each of these as a separate object. Just like actually here for address, we also have a separate object. Let me kind of show you this. Here we have the key address. Okay, now this is an object. Begins there, here, ends here. Why is it an object? Because it is a listing of key value pairs. That's why it has to be an object. The reason why this list is has 3 objects in it. Okay, so for JSON, you can't just have if you removed these brackets, it would give you an error. It says that each one of these must be its own object within this list. So this is a list or an array of objects, objects being key value pairs. Okay. Now, the nice thing, and I'm going to talk about this at the end of tonight, the nice thing about networking is we don't tend to have to create our own key, figure out how we want to organize the data. Okay, and I'll talk more about that. But that's usually already done for us. Yeah. All right, let me kind of. Here's another one. Oh, let me actually show you this here in. So I have this, say here it is in Visual Studio Code. So you can see it nice here. So we have the beginning of the list or an array, the end here. And I use those kind of the same list and array right now, the same thing. But there's an object. There's an object. There's an object. So we have 3 objects in this list. All right, the other one I want to show you, this is just another way to look at, this is another JSON file called superheroes. And it has and I kind of grabbed this as a common one used on the internet, but I added a couple of my own superheroes, Radia Perlman and Vince Cerf. But here we have, it's a superhero squad. So the squad name, key value. Key value, key value. This is generic information about our superheroes object. Secret base. Are they active? Yes. So this is all generic information. Okay, about general information about this team. This team also has members. Has members. Okay. Now we're getting into a list or an array of members that starts here and actually ends here. Each member is an object because each member is going to have a whole listing of key value pairs. Key value, key value. Same here, name, age. Okay. There's also one key called powers, and it's also a list. This is actually a simple list. Notice these aren't objects. And actually, let me kind of, I've actually got all this here. Okay, object beginning, object ending. So I'm going to talk about powers here. These are key value pairs. This is the beginning of the array. This is the end of this array, this list of members. Okay, so the members is the key, and it's an array. That's the value. This array is a list of objects. So we saw that, each one of these here. And by the way, I probably should get rid of this. But this underline means this isn't really here. This is just to show you this is the end. This is it here, just to show you how it lined up. Okay. So list of key, so this is an object, and each object has a one or more. This has multiple key value pairs. Now, one of this value keys, powers, is a simple list. Now, why aren't these objects? Because these are not, because a simple list can't have a key value pair. These are just values. You can't have, if you want to have key value pairs, they have to be in JSON within an object. Okay. Don't get too overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember this? You don't have to. Okay, most of the time, you're just reading the data. Okay, unless you're developing your own data formats and stuff like that, and then you'll get used to this. But most of the time, you can look how readable this is. I mean, everybody's new to JSON. Come on, where's my cursor here? Boys, there we go. So, being new to JSON, it's still very readable, especially when we have the nice indentation. We can see, oh, we have, here's a superhero, rad redundancy, 39, secret identity, Radia Perlman. Her powers are, here's just a list of powers. Loop prevention, fast convergence, logo sage. Okay, that's different than a list of name, key value. These are a list of key value pairs. This is just a list of values. Here we have another object, IP man, okay, Vint Cerf, who developed the TCP/IP protocol, the early one. Okay, powers, TCP/IP guru, IP6 for Seer. He's a surfer too. Okay, but that's just a list, and we could have multiple. We could have one, or we could have 100 different items here in the list. Okay, and again, guess what? If we wanted to see this easily in, here it is in Visual Studio Code. Okay. I'm going to move this over here. That makes it a little easier. Okay, so that's JSON. You know, and again, it's just a list of key value pairs. Don't get too hung up on, you know, where you put the brackets, where you put braces. That just comes with, you know, as a matter of fact, like I said, you know, I'm looking at JSON right now, you know, familiar with it. If I don't look at it for a month and I've been dealing with something else, I'll come back to this and go, okay, oh, what was this again? So most of the times it's just so it's easy just to follow along. You can see just by the, really by the indentation and the braces and brackets, you know, what goes with what. Okay, so let's move on to YAML. Everybody doing okay? Everybody got their hot chocolate, apple cider, tea, coffee, glass of wine, maybe a beer, I don't know. Whatever your beverage of choice. Okay, YAML stands for YAML Ain't Markup Language. It's another type of human readable language, another data format. Okay, so here we have our Florida Evans JSON file. Here's the same thing in YAML. And again, without knowing YAML, we can actually read this. Name, Florida Evans, age 35, children. Oh, looks like a list here. Address, oh, looks like an address, but it looks like we have more kind of key value pairs here. Street, city, states. We can, again, it's readable, right? And the nice thing is, it's human readable, and it's also easy to read by computers. Okay. Like it's actually considered a superset, kind of taking JSON, but kind of going, you know, kind of looking up another few thousand feet. That's how I like to think of it, at looking at JSON. It's a minimalist format. It's easy to both read and write. Okay, it's like, oh, wow, this is kind of easy. I don't need to worry about it. I don't see brackets. I don't see braces. Okay, actually, it doesn't use brackets or braces or even commas. It actually uses indentation. Yes, indentation matters to YAML. So this here being indented, street, city, state, and zip, means that all of this is part of address. Okay, and we have tools to convert between them. Okay, so let me grab my Evans file. So I'm going to copy. What I just did is I just copied this, and I would just want to show you. So here we have a JSON to YAML converter. And all I need to do is paste in my JSON. Look at this. It says unexpected token. Remember, I did something in my JSON file to show you an error. And it's saying unexpected token at position 247. what it doesn't like is that right there. That I put that comma there, remember, to show you that YAML will give me a little red line. There we go. Now it converted it to YAML. Oops. Wow, that was easy. So it's very easy to go between these different data formats. Okay, I wish human languages was that easy. I try and use Google Translate and all that, and you know, it works fairly okay for some things. When I use it to talk to friends of mine in like China, not so good. They're getting better though. I will say that. Okay, there's also Yamo Validator. So I could actually go to code Beautify here. And you can, again, I could type in YAML and validator. Oh yeah, right here. So it looks like it gives me that as an option. So we can validate our YAML. I'm pretty sure that this converter, it made sure that the JSON was valid. So I'm sure this YAML is going to be valid, but I can type that in here and validate. Yeah, it's valid. Valid YAML. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about YAML. So first of all, this is important. It begins with 3 hyphens at the top of every YAML file. Okay. So that's what it starts with. Indentation matters. It's common to use 2 spaces. So I don't know if you can tell here, but I have 2 spaces here. That seems to be what's most common, but that's what denotes the structure instead of braces and brackets and things like that. Key value pairs are written as key : value. White space after, so take a look at this is how they do it. You cannot have a white space between here and here, but this white space is optional. Okay, again, YAML cares about white space. But this white space here happens to be optional. Matter of fact, what would happen if I did this? You take it? Oh, it's saying it's valid. That's interesting. Oh, but if I do that, it's okay. What did I say here? Key value written as a key value. The white space after the colon is, that looks like it's before the colon. I always write it like this, so I always use it like this. Huh, that's, well, okay, I'll have to look at that. So it looks like that is not optional, but that is. So it looks like the white space before the colon is optional. White space or colon. Let's just quickly. Why does YAML spec after the colon? So it's saying it's after the colon. All right, we'll deal with that later. Not that important here. Best just I always put the key : space value. Arrays. So arrays or lists denoted by a hyphen. So here we have children as the key : and then the list is just hyphen name, hyphen value, hyphen value, hyphen value. Okay. Quotes, single or double quotes, are actually optional. I'm not sure I like this. Yes, so the hyphens do indicate the list. To me, it's a little bit, I like a little bit more structure, I guess. But I see, so notice that it said, oh, I can tell that's a string. I can tell that's a string. I can tell that's a string. Now here, we can use quotes to force it to say this is a string. I mean, don't treat this as a number. 10707. That's not 10,707. It's just a string of what happens to be numbers, but can be anything. Okay. So they are optional and are used to force a string. Now notice up here, we have 35. So it will realize, hey, that is a number. Okay. So yeah, this is just my Yamo validator. And here I'm just showing you that here we have, let's take a look. 123 Walnut Street, Tuckahoe, New York, all without quotes. And here we have it all with quotes. Okay. So again, here's just looking, here we have it in JSON. Again, you know, I tend to be like become familiar with one data format and just then take a look at it in the other ones. But here we have children, first name JJ. So here, and this is just something you kind of got to get used to. So here we have a list, children. So this is going to be a list or an array. In JSON, we have an object. These are separate objects with key value pairs. So here we list it like this. So the hyphen goes with the first key in the object, which is first name. But notice there's no hyphen here. So first name, JJ, age 22. Then the hyphen again for the beginning of, so it's really the beginning of each object in JSON, or the beginning. So this is kind of children, first name, JJ, age 22. So we put these two together. This is what that hyphen does. Here we put these two together. And here we put these two together. Because we have hyphen, no hyphen, hyphen, no hyphen. I didn't make up these rules, by the way. And, you know, I'm always getting caught on certain things. But again, this is why it's so nice to use, you know, our, you know, use things like, let me just bring up a YAML real quick here. Here's superheroes in YAML. So YAML, here we have kind of all the main key value pairs. And then we have a list or an array of members. So here's the first member. Okay, we're separating the members by these hyphens. Okay, these key value pairs, another key. But notice the indentation here. So notice that powers, that the indentation is right underneath. The hyphen is lined up with the P in powers. Here, the hyphen is lined up with the M in members. So that means that these three values goes with this key. Each of these goes with members. I also like, notice how I'm highlighting name and it highlights all of them. This is just a thing of using Visual Studio Code. Really nice if you're doing any kind of coding or data formatting or anything like that. All right. So this, again, this is showing you the JSON and YAML. Okay, let's do one more, XML. Okay, XML, if you've ever done any or looked at even HTML, it's almost the same, very similar to HTML. Like HTML, it's a markup language. It's self-descriptive. So notice that in these tags, that's the key. And then within the tag is the value. And then the end of the key is here. So it uses these tags, and we use a slash. The name, here's the key or the tag, and slash that tag means that's the end of that value. So it's very readable. Again, it uses this tag slash tag with the data in between, marking the beginning and the end of the data. Unlike HTML, these tags are not predefined. You come up with those, okay, or whatever, the program comes up with those. Okay, they're not part of XML. Okay, quotes are optional. Okay, now they must have a root element. So you notice that it has a tag here, root. This is how it starts and this is how it ends. So all of this is so this is kind of the beginning, this is the end. I'll talk about this called the prologue. I'll talk about that in a moment. But notice that we have key value pairs here, key value pairs. Oh, here, children, just a list of children. So children, JJ, children, Thelma, children, Michael, children. These are all slashes here. I put them in bold. So there's not just one children with a list. Each one is tagged separately. Here we have address. Here's the end of that tag. So all of this is the address, which is has several key value pairs in it: street, city, state, and zip, but it all belongs to address. Just another way to format the same data. Okay. And it's really no different than how we kind of do things anyway. You know, somebody's asking you to keep a list of something. I was saying, I probably need to do this at some point to show you this, but I could do it in a Word document. I could put it in a table in a Word document. I could use a spreadsheet. There's a lot of different ways to format data, okay? And these are three ways that we're looking at here. Okay. White space doesn't matter. So when we say white space, we mean indentation and spaces. So when you see all this indentation here, it doesn't matter. I could have all of this here lined up, okay? And it doesn't matter. What matters is it sees this is the beginning of address and this is the end. So it knows that these three things here belong to address or within the key address. Yeah. And we'll see XML with netconf uses XML. So here's our JSON, okay? Let's look at it in XML. Well, we did so, but just to compare the two. In XML, the prologue, this is the prologue. It's optional, but if it exists, it must come first. We will see this prologue when we get XML data returned from a device that we're communicating with using netconf. This is the nesting of elements. So you can nest elements, but you have to have the beginning tag and the ending tag. This is nesting all these elements all under address. So they all have different terms for everything too, these different data formats, just how it is. Okay. So here's my Evans too. And by the way, just a quick reminder, all of these files are available here. So here we see it under JSON, okay, which was an array of objects for the different children. But here it's just simply children, first name, age, children, first name, age, children, first name, age. And there's no more children. So now we go to address, but we have some nested key value pairs within it. So Andrew asked me, Rick, do I see these scripting and data skills becoming fundamental skills of a network engineers, like understanding IP addressing, subnetting, and other core skills? Yes. Yeah, these I would say, yeah, scripting or, beginning to understand Python and data formats. but the data formats, as you'll see, really is, it'll come. You know, it's just the way that they show the data, and it's actually becomes easy once you're working in it. You typically do not have to organize the data. It's actually organized for you. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes, why I say that. But yeah, this is understanding data formats or becoming familiar with them. I don't expect you to, if I was teaching a class in this, I might have some exercises where we do this, but let everybody validate their code, then do it in JSON, XML, and YAML, but then let everybody use converters too. I mean, that's the real world. Nobody just does this on the fly and says, oh, I can't use that. I mean, the real world is you can validate what you're doing. It's not cheating, that the thing is, you just start become more and more, the more you work with it, the more familiar you are with it. So Andrea says, XML is used for nationwide emergency medical records, statistical format called Nemesis. I'm going to say Nemesis. All fire departments and ambulances, yeah. It's a very easy way to format data. Yeah, she's used a Visual Studio to correct files every now and then. Yeah, it's really nice. And again, you also have, you also have, Code Beautify. You have all ways to validate, even outside Visual Studio Code that will tell you what the problem is. I really like this in that, you're not alone. I mean, this isn't an exam. This isn't like in school where do you know how to do this? It's not like writing a language where, learning a human language where you're going to be expected to write it correctly. If you're learning from, English and you're learning Chinese, learning how to write it, how to speak it and all that, because you have to do that, at least today. I see this as a way of no, there's different formats, but there are tools that will help you with the conversion, the translation. Okay, there's the JSON and XML. Matter of fact, I'll bring that up here. Where's my XML of that? The superheroes. So I'll show you what I do. I just go right here, and it actually defaults. If I want to open this up, if I do open with, you'll see it. Oh, actually, a word. I'm going to open with. Oh, that's weird. It's coming up with Word all of a sudden. I'll go here, but that's usually my default with this. Okay, that's odd. Okay, anyway, so here is the superheroes. And kind of cool, you can see here's kind of the generic information for the team. And then we have the individual members. So it's just listed members. So, and then again, indentation doesn't matter, but here we have the list for this member here, the key value pairs for this member. And here's the powers. It's just powers. And then that's the end of that member. Then we go to the next member. It's a very easy format to use. Probably one of the reasons why some people prefer JSON over something like XML is, although this is really easy, there's a lot of wording in here. And you'll see that when we use netconf. I mean, it's you get a lot of stuff in here. All this blue is, compare this to the blue here. Here I see mostly values because just using braces and brackets. Here it's using words for everything. So we see a lot of key tags and end of tags. Okay, so again, who uses what? netconf uses XML only. Okay, so the way we send information to a netconf server, so from my computer, the way I want to talk to the router or configure the router, that data is going to be in XML. The data it returns to me, like maybe I want configuration information, it's going to be in XML. Okay. Now, can I convert that? Sure, I can convert it from one to the other and work with it in another format. RESTconf, I have choice of JSON or XML. And Ansible is typically, the playbook is YAML, and the inventory files, which playbook is just your kind of your list of commands that your playbook, what you want it to do. The inventory file is your list of devices you want it to do it to. And that can be YAML or JSON. It's actually just an INI or config file by default. Okay, but I want to mention, we've talked about these different data formats. And I kept on saying, hey, don't worry about how the data is structured. Don't worry about, well, let me use this as an example. If we were collecting a list of people, information on people, I could say, I want name, date of birth, and address. Okay, ignore Word, Excel, and database for a second here. But what if I'm keeping a list of people this way, name, date of birth, address. You are keeping a list, first name, last name, age, street, city, state, zip. Now we're keeping the same information, but we're doing it differently. My address is just kind of a long string of information. You're separating it. Hey, that sounds even better, because then if I wanted to get the state everybody is in, it's a lot easier your way. Also, I can sort by last name or first name. Here, this could be a problem, because if somebody's putting in data, they might put in first name and then last name. Somebody else might do last name, first name. Somebody might put commas in here. Okay, so kind of the more structured we are with actually identifying what the fields are, first of all, less like, the more consistent our data is going to be. Okay, and less likely for errors. Okay. All right. The other thing I want to mention kind of about this is we could do this data, and however we organize it doesn't matter, but I could do it in Word, Excel, or some database. So these are kind of different formats, and this is how we organize the data. Okay. So yeah, and you'll become more familiar with this here in a moment, but as far as this is showing netconf and restconf, you can use, netconf uses XML only, restconf can use XML or JSON. So that's just kind of what you want to use. But as far as the data itself, okay, we want something that is consistent. Wouldn't it be nice if all the data that we had to work with in networking, didn't matter the device, the model, didn't even matter the vendor, whether it's Cisco, Juniper, HP, that when we got data from them, or when we want to ask for data, it's all the same. It's all organized on everybody's equipment the same. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, guess what? That's known as Yang. So first of all, here is router output from show interface, gig 000, all that. Wow, that's ugly. Yang is an IETF RFC, and there's several of them. And a lot of work here is done by this company, TLF Systems. But it actually says it's a data modeling language. And it actually is, it's a way that we can have all vendors agree on what is the specific data fields. What are their names? What's the type of data? What is the structure? I mean, this is all done for us already? Yes, it is. So Yang is used to model configuration data. So how we want to configure a device, whether it's a Juniper device or a Cisco device. Okay. Operational state data. What I mean that is when I get a show command with all that stuff, guess what? It's going to give it to me in a certain format of key value pairs. Here's an example. This is on a router interface. And this is how we'll take a look at Yang later. What I want to do is kind of get our feet wet. I'll show you a little bit of Ansible, or I'm sorry, netconf and restconf first. And I'm not sure how I'm going to interweave Yang. I have a whole presentation on just Yang. So I'm not sure if I'll do it separately or interweave it, but I'll figure it out. But for the interfaces, so this is for IETF interfaces. This is the name of the Yang module. If you want this Yang module from this device, this is how it's going to give you the data. Okay, it's the name of the, so here's the name, its description, type, whether it's up or not, enabled or not, and then the state of the device. I'll talk more about all this stuff later. But operational state, statistics, the speed, the bandwidth, physical address, that's the MAC address. So it's all, this is how Yang organizes it. Yang is data format independent, meaning it will work with JSON, XML, YAML. It doesn't care. It just says, this is the name of the information. This is, when we're all couldn't figure out, how we were going to organize the data, it does it for us. That's what Yang does for us. Okay. So when we talk netconf and restconf, we are talking Yang. Let me show you that. So Yang, there's actually another data model called XSD that netconf can use, but Yang is it. Yang is the data model used by netconf and restconf. Okay, so the XML for netconf or the XML for JSON for restconf, we can get the data is pre-organized for us from Yang. And one last note, I don't know if I have it on here. Let me see if I do or not. Who organizes this data? Who organizes this Yang data is IETF, but also the vendors. So you can actually have a Yang model for a specific vendor. So Cisco has Yang models has its own Yang models. If you want to work with just Cisco devices and that device, if you want to use their model, you can. You don't have to. You can use IETF. This is an IETF model. But yes, Cisco has their own. Juniper has their own. That anybody can use, but you don't have to use theirs. Got to be careful. If I want to use a Cisco model, that means it's only going to work on Cisco devices, usually on a certain operating system. Okay, but that's a call I can make. Okay, so this is how we're going to be interacting with devices, this is already happening to both configure devices. Okay, and I'll show you. I think I'll show you. Actually, I'll show you next in 2 weeks. Okay, I'm going to cover in 2 weeks APIs. I'll throw a little netconf or restconf, little netconf in there to show you what it actually. Hey, wow, we can actually get this information, and it shows me it all in XML and in a format that is standardized. Very cool. Because think of the power of this. We're just about done here. But just think about the power of this when you get information in structured data, because now you can write programs or put it in a database and analyze the data much more easily than that. You can get the same structured data from dozens, hundreds, thousands of devices. And all of a sudden you have a list of, you all of a sudden have a list. I don't have it's not all here, but the name, the interface, the MAC addresses. And if I kept on going, here it's got broadcast packets, multicast packets, but there's other stuff in here. It'd be like the IPv4 address, subnet mask, IPv6 address, prefix length. You can all of a sudden that's all right there for you in these key value pairs in a nice XML, let's say, nice XML format, and you've got it all for all your devices. And you can now quickly use that information to analyze it, or you can think how quickly you could configure devices. If you had a YAML file with all the devices in there and their IP addresses, and you wanted to change something, probably not the IP address remotely, but well, you can, but let's say you wanted to add some kind of quality of service, and you just add it to a YAML file that pushes it out to all the devices. So it's a big step above my life of using the command line interface. So you'll all be moving forward with this. Hopefully I'll be there with you for a while. I'm not going anywhere. So not that I know of anyway. So anyway, again, got all of this here for you. Next week, we're going to talk about APIs, generic APIs, mostly RESTful APIs. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. And since it's our last, and I'm talking 2 weeks from now, I keep on saying next week, 2 weeks from now. Since this will be the last one before the break, I think we get give you like 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks. I'll show you a little netconf so you can kind of see where we're eventually headed. Okay. Everybody doing okay? A lot of cool stuff. Don't feel intimidated by knowing all this stuff. You're ahead of the curve. I got to tell you. Okay. All the same people I've been talking to for years about IPv6 and how you got to learn IPv6. Now they're going, oh no, Rick, they're telling us something else now we got to learn. It's these old people like me that are sweating it. Okay. All right. All right. So I'll go ahead and let you all go. Thank you so much for showing up live and listening to the recordings. So I hope you find this of value, and I will let you have the rest of your evening. And I appreciate you showing up, and thank you very much. And thanks to all of you. I really do appreciate it. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be, it really helps me put my content together. Someday we'll have a class with exercises and more labs and all that. So somewhere, someplace, don't know where it will be. But, all right. Have a good night, all.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.